Shutdown, showdown. The impasse over funding for a wall on the US-Mexico border is about to enter its 5th week with no end in sight. Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu, and this is The Heat. The partial US government shutdown, already the longest in the country's history, has now hit the one-month mark. Republicans and Democrats locked in a battle over border security, with neither side willing to compromise. Caught in the middle, some 800,000 federal workers, many forced to work without pay, and millions more affected. Economists warn the country's growth could take a major hit as the debate over immigration rages on. Well, there is much to talk about. Let's go straight to our panel. Joining us here in Washington is Jonathan Broder. He's a senior writer for Newsweek. Maria Pena is the senior Washington correspondent for La Opinion and Intermedia. Best-selling author and commentator Eric Bolling hosts America on Blaze TV. He joins us from Charleston, South Carolina. And also with us is CGTN's White House correspondent Nathan King. Thank you to all of you for joining us. Nathan.
Hi.
On the border, there is no agreement about the wall. There's no agreement on the shutdown as well between the two sides. Donald Trump on the one hand and the opposition Democrats on the other. So we have stalemate. What's the latest?
A stalemate. I mean, you keep on hoping that things are going to move, and then they just get worse. You remember there was some finger-pointing last week after a White House meeting where Trump raised his hands in the middle of the meeting and said bye and walked out, and there's various descriptions of that meeting. It's got worse with Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi trading bars over the State of the Union and whether Trump should show up, and then Trump seemingly retaliating by cancelling military transport for a weekend trip to Afghanistan from congressional leadership. So this is not the climate where you make deals, is it? And, you know, it's so avoidable because we could have had some of this wall funding and a DACA, a Dreamers solution very early on in his presidency, and that sort of slipped away. Now, with Republicans obviously in charge of the Senate, but Democrats in charge of the House, and Donald Trump's base being told daily that the wall is being built, I can't see who blinks first.
Jonathan, you know, we have a partial shutdown right now, and this is something very difficult for people outside the United States to understand. I keep getting asked by friends and colleagues in other countries, what do you mean the government's shut down? How do you shut down a government? Well, it can happen. It's happening right now in the United States. 800,000 workers. What is this doing to the economy of this country, if not the workers' lives? And how are they affected?
It's taking a hit. I mean, I think that a lot of people don't realize just how much the government employees and government spending has to do with the economy. It's not only the workers, there's 800,000 workers, but every one of those workers spends money themselves. So it's the vendors in those towns where those people are now not spending any money. So there's a ripple effect.
And they must be feeling the effect right here in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
The federal capital.
Surely, not only in Washington, but in the surrounding counties in Virginia and Maryland, people are really hurting. And it's the stories that one hears, you know, people having to go to soup kitchens to get a meal. That's not very good.
Eric, if we look at the impact this shutdown is having, according to S&P, if this stalemate continues, the loss to the U.S. economy will exceed the cost of the wall that President Trump wants to construct on the U.S.-Mexico border. He wants $5.7 billion for that. No one's prepared to compromise right now. Has the president effectively painted himself into a corner here?
Well, I think they both have. I think the president and the Democrats have painted themselves into opposite corners across the room, and there is little movement of either one of them trying to meet in the middle of the ring. I find it very odd that all of a sudden there's major impact to the 800,000 government workers. By the way, they're called non-essential for a reason. They're not that essential. Sorry to make this point. I've seen all the sob stories on the media about people having to go to soup kitchens, which I'm not really sure why that's happening. But let's talk bigger picture. This $5 billion, you're talking about almost a $20 trillion economy. A $5 billion is not even recognizable. On the other hand, $5 billion and a $4 trillion spending budget, you could find that we lose $5 billion every week probably in the government. This is all a political football being played back and forth by on one side, the Trump administration, on the other side, the Democrats, and the Republicans in the Senate are just standing back going, let's see how this plays out because we don't want to get in the middle of this.
I would challenge him. I would challenge him to go talk to federal workers that are furloughed or working without pay. I doubt that you would call that a sub-story when you have people who are relying on a paycheck to pay their mortgage, their credit card bills, their kids in college, and what have you. I really disagree with him characterizing this as a sub-story. This is happening, like you said, it's happening to the local economy.
But you know what, Eric, I'll challenge you, Ms. Pena. I challenge you to talk to some people.
I was courteous to you, so you let me finish, okay?
Go ahead.
I was courteous to you, I let you finish.
All right, Maria, go ahead.
You know, we have right now $1.2 billion in losses for every week that the shutdown continues.
Right.
And yes, by the time this is over, whenever it's over, then you would have financed the border wall by then. But this is not just about the border wall. I mean, the president keeps talking about Democrats being for open borders, and that's just nonsense. They offered him money for border security, minus the wall, because there are other ways to do border security, and he rejected it. And he rejected all previous offers.
Okay,
so now we have
Democrats that you're talking about, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer,
Eric, I will get to you, Eric. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I want to go around the table. Jonathan, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think what Eric is doing here is very, very classic of what the administration is doing, which is not focusing on the pain that the shutdown is causing to individuals who work for the government, but focusing on the $5 billion figure and how minimal it is compared to the much larger figure of the economy.
Okay.
That's basically a false comparison.
All right.
Well, you brought up the economy, Jonathan. I didn't. You brought up the, in Anand, you guys said this was going to be a threat to the $20 trillion per year GDP economy, which it is not. Let me point something out. Years ago, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, President Clinton, Barack Obama, and Dianne Feinstein were in favor of building a wall, a border wall, if it was tied to an immigration policy change. So all of a sudden the wall became from effective to ineffective because Trump wants to do it. One more point, and I'll let you guys talk for the rest of the show.
Okay.
We spend $27 billion per year in foreign aid. So what does that mean? We can't get $5 billion to make President Trump happy and then go ahead and somehow justify spending $27 billion to Afghanistan, to Israel, to Jordan, to build their own walls. It's absolutely ludicrous.
All right, Eric,
I thought that Mexico was going to pay for the wall.
Oh, no, they forgot that talking point already.
Oh,
it's
no.
long gone.
Well, Chris, would you address that?
Let me clarify something.
Let me go to Nathan first, and I will get to you. Nathan, go ahead.
Lively show.
Yeah.
With all due respect, Eric, you know, it's not just about the 800,000 federal workers. It's also about what is shut down. If you're a small business looking for a subsidized loan, like you're a farmer, for example, you have to go through the Small Business Association. You can't get that when the government shut down. If you want to get a mortgage, and you're an FHA mortgage, which a lot of mortgages are, especially in expensive metropolitan areas, you go through the FHA. All that is shut down right now. Look, you're a business host. You're a very good one as well. You know how things trickle down. Why, when it's okay for Wall Street for trickle-down economics, but when it's bad news in federal government, trickle-down economics doesn't work? You know that if you furlough 800,000 workers, there's going to be an economic impact, and you close down areas of the government that provide services to businesses and to taxpayers, that there's going to be a big problem, and there is a big problem.
Okay, Maria.
I wanted to second that. For instance, airlines are already hurting. You know, they're not getting all the revenue from federal workers flying around to do their business. Contractors in the D.C. area, I've interviewed people who have lost contracts that are put on hold. They're not going to get any back pay.
Yeah, the contractors,
That's the other thing. And the other thing, to talk about Democrats supporting the wall, I can tell you, I covered it. I covered it, and if you let me finish, I'll explain it. Border, you know, back with the Bush administration, President Bush signed a Border Fence Act. And yes, Democrats voted for it, including then Senator Obama. But there's a big distinction because this was not a border wall along the entire length of the border as the President Trump promised his base. Okay, these were obviously intelligently placed border fences wherever they seem deemed appropriate.
Okay.
You talk to experts, the ones that really know what they're talking about at the border, and they'll tell you it's unrealistic and a waste of money to build a wall in places where you can't build a wall.
You can walk across
and
Rio
it's
Grande.
also it's already proven, because in El Chapo trial in New York, they've already told you this.
Okay.
Most of the drug is not coming in between the ports of entry. They're coming through the ports of entry.
Okay.
So the wall is not going to stop illegal immigration because they'll find a detour. It's not going to stop drug trafficking because they'll find other ways to cheat the system.
Okay.
So, and no
Maria,
one is talking about economic development in Central America to stem the flow of illegal immigration from there either.
Okay, let me go. Eric, go ahead.
So I was at the border last week. I walked across the Rio Grande. You can walk across the Rio Grande in places. Listen, I don't know if a border is going to work. First, a wall is going to work. Donald Trump's talking about a fence.
To spend the money
you want to talk about economic impact? All right, I'll address that. Mexico is paying for that border wall many times over by the renegotiated NAFTA.
That's
period.
Untrue.
Full
That's
stop. Stop
untrue.
it. You know better. Number
Provenly
two,
untrue.
there is economic impact to this shutdown, but it is located in Washington, D.C., and frankly, the rest of this country doesn't give a damn.
Frankly, sometimes a lie is not just another point of view. And the whole idea that Mexico is paying for this wall through the new USMCA trade agreement is just not true. It hasn't been ratified through Congress yet, and it's going to have some real problems getting through that.
Well, it's going to be ratified in the other two countries, too.
There isn't some sort of diversionary fund of tariffs going to build the wall. That's not how it works.
Okay.
It's just a convenient excuse because Trump did not get any traction.
Can I show you how it works?
Okay,
Mexico
Eric, I do want to move on. Okay, I do want to move on, Eric, onto something else. Maria,
just understand one thing.
Very quickly.
Money is fungible. So whether or not you put money in this pocket and take it out of this pocket, you're still fungible money. So if we're saving hundreds or tens of billions of dollars with the renegotiated NAFTA of the United States, that means that Mexico, it's got to come from somewhere. All right, Mexico and Canada are paying for a wall. That's fine.
Okay.
Well, first of all, you have to talk about timelines. First of all, it hasn't been voted on, it hasn't been implemented, and by the time you get around those the so-called savings and benefits, it's going to be years.
Right,
and you're talking about he wants the wall now.
By the way, that trade agreement is going to be more expensive.
But not only that, by the time you do actually get the border wall done, if you do get it done, it'll be years.
Okay, I want to move on to something else. Maria, I want to stay with you for this, and my apologies, I incorrectly introduced you at the beginning of the show. You are an independent journalist.
Yes.
There's a report that's been released by the U.S. Health and Human Services Agency. That's a government agency that belongs to the administration. It says that the administration detained more migrant children than it previously admitted. What do we know about that?
Well, it's really alarming because, first of all, the first talking point that came out of DHS, and I've covered DHS since its creation, it was to deny that they were separating children. Right. And then it turned out that, yes, they were separating them as a form of a deterrent for illegal immigration. Of course, people know, if you talk to real families fleeing violence from Central America, that was not serving as a deterrent. And the worst thing about this particular report is that they don't even know exactly how many more or where they are. And that's the situation we have. We have thousands. We have in total about 12,000, 14,000 children. That figure includes the unaccompanied minors, which, by the way, also happened during the Obama administration. And you also have the children that were separated from their parents when they were caught at the border.
But during the Obama administration, it was the children of people who'd committed crimes.
Well, and even now the standard is, okay, so the standard from DHS is that they'll separate children if the parents are a threat to the well-being of the kids, if they have any legal or criminal records of so forth. But in this particular moment with the Trump administration, most of the kids had their parents with them, and they were separated, deliberately separated, and they didn't have.
You know why? Because they're classifying them as committed a crime by coming in and claiming asylum.
That
is the problem.
I'm not sure whether that is true, because you can come into the country and claim asylum. You haven't committed a crime.
Not according to this administration.
You are for DHS purposes.
All right, let me go to
having.
But the tragedy of this is that even now, even with the court orders, you still have children that have not been reunited with their parents.
Okay, Jonathan, the president says this is about national security. Is it?
No, well, look, every country has the right to protect its borders.
Right.
But as Maria was saying, the drugs aren't coming across the border over the fence.
Are terrorists coming over the border?
Well, there's no. There was a.
Can you believe if even one went through, it would have been, all the world news.
No acts of terrorism have been committed since the 1970s.
Right, now, let me just finish.
Yeah.
Trump had tweeted, I think today, that he cited a report that was in the Washington Examiner, which is highly discredited. And that report said that ranchers on the border found Muslim prayer rugs in the desert, suggesting that Al-Qaeda or Daesh is coming across the border and they're praying before they're coming. Nobody ever found any rugs.
Right,
it's a totally discredited report, but yet Trump tweets it.
Okay. Eric, where does the president get this kind of information that there were prayer rugs at the border?
Well, I was on the phone with a rancher at the border. I was in Laredo, Texas for 2 days doing a story on the opioids and drugs coming across. By the way, 90% of the fentanyl that comes into the country produced in China comes through our southern border, period, in case you didn't realize that, number one. Number two, Jonathan, you say every country has a right to protect its borders, to be a sovereign country. So how do you suggest we protect a border that literally hundreds of thousands of people come across that border every single year? How do you suggest we do that?
I would suggest that you do it sensibly. There's no problem. I have no problem. Many people have no problem.
Be specific. Be specific.
You use technology. You use a combination of technology. In some places, you have a wall where a wall would be effective.
Thank you.
But there are other places where the wall that Trump is suggesting, as Maria said, where you have a wall going from one end of the border to the other, just makes no sense, and it's a waste of money.
Can I just say,
sorry, one moment. Nathan first.
Sorry, can I just say something? This is a false premise, because there is no crisis at the border. Right? The number of illegal immigrants coming in through the southern border is
gone down.
Ridiculously low numbers compared to the last 30 years. This is an invented
Hundreds of
crisis.
thousands.
So,
Hundreds of thousands,
all this talk about how do you stop this crisis?
Hundreds
How do you
of
stop the
thousands
flow?
a year.
It's actually really, when you look at it over time, this is not a crisis. There is a crisis with opioid addiction in this country. Let's tackle that.
Eric, I will get you in a moment. Eric, I will get you in a moment. Eric, I will get you. Maria, go ahead very quickly, please.
No, I was just going to say the same thing, that, it's never, illegal immigration from Mexico has been also at its lowest point because conditions changed in Mexico. And my earlier point is anyone even talking about addressing the root causes of illegal immigration? Most people don't want to leave their homes if they don't have to. And yet these people are forced to because there's violence, there's gang violence. Honduras has one of the highest crime rates in the world. And so no one is talking about how to address
why didn't these migrants?
All right, go ahead, Eric. Go
why
ahead.
Didn't these Guatemalan and Honduran migrants stop in Mexico where they were offered asylum? They said, no, we're going to keep going to the United States. That's where we want to go for our asylum. They have family in the U.S.
What would you do if you had family?
It wasn't seeking safety or refuge. It was seeking a better economic life. Let me just leave you with one thought. If any one of you panelists there think that this is okay, that if you were to leave your front door open, someone were to walk in, sit in your living room, say, I'm here now, you're not allowed to throw me out, and guess what? If you do, you're racist. Now, does that make any sense to anyone here at all?
Well, first of all, you're making, again, another favorite one of those talking points that conservatives like to use. But it's a false analogy because a lot of these people have families in this country as well. And let me tell you, there's such a thing as due process. If you can make a valid claim for asylum, you have the right to be heard. You have the right to have a day in court to defend your case. And the administration is curtailing that right.
Okay, one moment. Nathan, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bigger point here, and I think you started to touch on it. Jim Mattis, who of course was a defense secretary up until a few weeks ago when he was resigned or unceremoniously fired, said, look, we need a Marshall Plan for Central America. This is not going to stop until we start looking into the violence in these societies, the murder rate, the cartels, etc. We need to approach this as a regional crisis, as part of the Americas. There have been a lot of people in this administration, in other administrations, who had similar thoughts as well. It's just amazing that all we're fixated on in this country is on a wall and then everything south of that just doesn't seem to matter. And I think that's a really important point here, is that it's a regional crisis. If there is indeed a crisis, it's in Honduras.
It is a regional crisis.
Instead of having the government pitch in, instead of having the government say, we're gonna address the issue of economic development, for instance, what you have is a severe cutback in foreign aid to those poor countries. Yeah, well, and so, you reap what you sow.
Let's talk about how this idea of a wall is seen in the United States. There was a poll that was done by Pew. It would seem the president is out of sync with the American people. 51% of those polled oppose the wall, 29% support it. And the president's ratings have been tanking because of this issue.
Yes. I would say that this controversy is hurting him politically. I mean, I know that the conservatives will support him and mention the talking points, but if you look at the polls and you look at just the news, and not only the fake news as Trump calls it, but most news organizations show a population and public opinion that is against Trump on this.
Eric, is the president hurting himself here?
I think so. I think it is hurting his popularity, but it's also what got him elected, and his base is demanding the wall be built. I agree. I don't think by building a structure along our border is going to fix our immigration. It'll help. It won't fix our immigration problem. We need all of the above strategy. We do need technology. We need drone technology. We need more border agents. We need an all hands on deck along the border strategy, not just the wall. The president wants a wall. It's a political football. He wants a $5.7 billion a check for his starting of the wall. He won't back down until he gets it. The left doesn't want to give it to him because it's hurting him politically. Yeah. $5 billion is a drop in the bucket for this administration. Other administrations have asked for. Obama asked for a $200 billion green energy appropriations and got it.
Okay, go ahead, Jonathan.
I think what's happening here is that Trump is basically, the way it's perceived, is that Trump is asking for $5 billion for a temper tantrum. Nancy Pelosi, who is his biggest foe on
actually for a re-election, so
she basically said, look, I'm a grandmother. I recognize a temper tantrum when I see one. And that's basically what Chris has even admitted.
But isn't it also something where Trump could go back to his base and say, I keep my election campaign promises?
In fact, I think that's...
Then he has to get Mexico to pay for the wall.
No. Well, but this is really interesting, though, because he could look at it in terms of strategy, for instance. Right. He could always go to his base next year and say, I tried, but the Democrats, those darn Democrats didn't want to give it to me, but I tried. And then, so he's saving face with his base too. But, it's a little bit disingenuous because in the end, he's not fulfilling that one of the many promises he made to his base. Right. But the thing is, to talk about the stuff that Obama asked and got, green energy is a whole different thing than, dealing with illegal immigration, which is also controversial. But, if you and I had the magic formula for how to deal with that, we wouldn't be sitting discussing it because it is a very thorny issue that the U.S. has dealt with or faced for decades, okay? This isn't new, okay?
But also, go ahead. Go back to the strategy. It's not a winning strategy for Trump. He tried it in the midterms with the caravan. I mean, for basically the last 2 weeks of the election, all we heard was caravan, there's an invasion. He lost control of the House, 40 seats went. If that's going to be the strategy for re-election in 2020, he's in real problems because, as we all know, he essentially won the election in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan.
He can't win
they all turn out pretty much against him in the midterm. So if I can just finish before Eric keeps on butting in. So basically, the base is actually shrinking, not growing whenever he brings this up.
Eric, there is some evidence of that. There was another poll that I'm going to cite right now, according to an NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll. More than half of registered voters polled say they're not going to vote for President Trump in 2020. 57% against, 30% for the president. This is the president losing his base, isn't he?
No, not at all. What that is that reflects 2016 election too. Hillary Clinton beat him in the popular vote, but he won the Electoral College in the states he needed to be in. I will give you this. he wins again. First of all, he loses if he doesn't get his wall because his base will flee. They don't want a negotiation of how bad Dems are. They already know how bad they think Dems are already. Wall or no, not getting a wall will sink his 2020 chances. I will give you this, though. He's going to have a serious electoral college problem with Ohio and Pennsylvania as of right now. So what he needs to do is get into those states and make sure he locks those down, and then goes and runs in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, where no one saw him winning, but he won. And that's really where the election is going to lie. Right now, if John Kasich, who just signed on with CNN, who hates Trump, becomes a problem to Donald Trump in Ohio, Trump will have a hard time winning a real election.
But I'm also willing to wager that in those states and any other state in the nation, it won't be because of his border wall. It will be for other issues. It will be for, whether or not the economy, it's inclusive of them, or because remember, he won on a message of economic populism. All the people left behind, blah blah blah. And so it'll be interesting to see if
have you seen the economy, Maria? Have you watched the economy? Have you watched the economy for Hispanics and minorities? It's best it's ever been.
Eric, Nathan, when is this going to end?
The shutdown?
The shutdown?
I mean, it could be tomorrow, but I doubt it. It's a real problem because I think the atmosphere has got so poisonous on Capitol Hill and at the White House that anyone who backs down risks losing the base. Look, Trump has a problem with his base. Eric's absolutely right. If he doesn't deliver this war, he's going to have a real problem, not just on Fox News and with Laura Ingraham and Rush Limbaugh, but with with all them, but also with people who trusted him on the wall. Build that wall, build that wall. It was the rallying cry. He said it. If people stop paying attention, he used to throw in the wall because everyone loved it. But remember, Nancy Pelosi has a base too, and this incoming Democratic team is, in some ways, very progressive, and they don't want to see their speaker backing down over this wall. So
Eric,
who's going to blink first?
Eric, final point, and I've got only 30 seconds for this. We're also seeing a very personal battle right now between Nancy Pelosi, the leader, the Speaker of the House, the opposition to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump right now. She told him to postpone the State of the Union speech. He said, well, I'm taking your military plane away on this tour that she was going to make in the Middle East and Europe.
It's really getting petty between the two of them. I don't think either one are going to blink. I think someone needs to, I guess, be the adult in the room and come in and figure out a way where Donald Trump can literally build a wall and the funding not be appropriated by Congress, and maybe some form of Defense Department and or cutting back foreign aid to get the money in place for what Donald Trump can run on in 2020. See, I built your wall.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us.